Bank upgrades Nigeria's economic growth to 1.8%. Global economy to expand by 5.6% in 2021, the fastest post-recession pace in 80 years, says World Bank. Private sector boost to the Nigerian coconut industry will create jobs, says Minister of State, Industry, Trade and Investment, Mariam Katagum. Plus, oil rises for second day on signs of strong fuel demand recovery. The discussion segment will focus on crowdfunding as an alternative means of financing socio-economic projects. This is Business Express on the network service of the NTA, and we are reaching you live from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us on the business side of life, and we'll start by telling you that the World Bank says the global economy is expected to expand 5.6% in 2021, the fastest post-recession pace in 80 years, largely on strong rebounds from a few major economies. Emerging markets and developing economies continue to struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath. Contained in its June 2021 Global Economic Prospects report, it says despite the recovery, global output will be about 2% below pre-pandemic projections by the end of this year. Per capita income losses will not be relaxed by 2022 for about two-thirds of emerging markets and developing economies. Among low-income economies where vaccination has lacked, the effects of the pandemic have reversed poverty reduction gains and aggravated insecurity and other long-standing challenges. Meanwhile, the World Bank upgraded its economic growth forecast for Nigeria in 2021 to 1.8%, citing higher oil prices, structural oil sector reforms, and market-based flexible exchange rate management. This represents a 0.7 percentage point increase from the 1.1% projected by the World Bank in January. The new forecast was contained in the World Bank's latest Global Economic Prospects titled Global Recovery Strong but Uneven as many developing countries struggle with the pandemic's lasting effects. The World Bank said growth in Nigeria is expected to resume at 1.8% in 2021 and edge up to 2.1% next year. Assuming higher oil prices, structural oil sector reforms, and market-based flexible exchange rate management, it also upgraded its economic growth forecast for the sub-Saharan Africa region to 2.8% from 2.7% projected in January. Ahead of the anticipated health recovery from the COVID-19, Africa needs a quicker economic recovery as the continent's economy had gone down 2.1%, the worst ever it had in more than 25 years. This came from the head of the African Development Bank Group, Akinwumi Adesina, as he discussed the financing that Africa needs to strategize its economic bounce back from COVID-19 just after the Africa Front Summit that recently ended. Justin Bem-Oyi reports.
It's a pandemic that is actually quite massive,
President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, was speaking on Across Africa, an interview program on France 24 channel on financing Africa's post-COVID-19 recovery. Dr. Adesina lamented how the African continent suffered massive drop in its GDP between $155 billion and $199 billion. And when the rest of the world had $23 trillion to respond to fiscal stimulus, Africa did not have that space. He re-emphasized that collective effort is needed at this time to look at the instruments the continent has to get that fiscal space that it needs, especially the issuance of the special drawing rights known as SDR at the IMF. The SDRs are basically the reserve quarters the IMF has to address global crises.
Africa needs, sub-Saharan Africa alone, the low-income countries, they need roughly $245 billion of additional financing between now and 2025. But when you look at all of sub-Saharan Africa, they will need $425 billion between now and 2025.
The AFDB boss also highlighted the biggest hurdles the African continent faces in post-pandemic and how the huge amounts of money discussed at the France-Africa Summit is going to change the lives of Africans.
You know, we talk quite a lot about growth and so on, and we talk about GDP. Look, nobody eats it. Nobody eats GDP. But at the end of the day, it's all about the quality of life of people. So one of the areas in which it's going to have to go to is to support Africa's recovery.
Dr. Adesina says he wants the debt profile in Africa to reduce and be restructured. But the continent has to learn how to link good economic governance to debt management. Justin Bemunyi.
Well, the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, is supporting the African Organization for Standardization to harmonize standards in the automotive sector in Africa in order to facilitate an accelerated development of the sector across the continent. The harmonized standards are to be adopted by individual African countries, facilitating cross-border trade under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There are 1,432 international automotive standards worldwide, largely developed by the International Organization for Standardization and the American Society for Testing and Materials to initiate the process of developing African automotive standards. Also prioritize what is referred to as whole vehicle standards, encompassing motor vehicle components, accessories, and replacement parts. ASO is planning to launch the completed harmonized African automotive standards by June 2021 in 6 countries, namely Rwanda, Ghana, Nigeria, Malawi, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Building on President Muhammadu Buhari's mantra of produce what you eat and eat what you produce, Minister of State, Industry, Trade and Investment, Mariam Katagum, believes that a private sector boost to the Nigerian coconut industry will create jobs to thousands of unemployed youth through its numerous value chain. The minister was speaking at the flag-off of a commodities exchange initiative in Abuja. The report. Regarded as the tree of life, coconut is a cash crop that grows in more than 30 states, with Lagos and Akwa Ibom having the largest. And with ongoing conversations on boosting non-oil exports, Minister of State, Industry, Trade and Investment, Mariam Katagum, is leading the campaign with the flag-off of One Family, 3 Coconut Trees, an initiative that seeks to actualize coconut sufficiency in Nigeria in the next 7 years.
The global market for the coconut is in excess of $6 billion US, which means that opportunities are huge. Therefore, as the 18th largest world producer of coconuts, we must work harder to increase our market share, and the best strategy is to start cultivation of the commodity for improved yield.
It is a statement of fact. Every drop of coconut oil used in sugar refineries in Nigeria is imported.
And now our mission is to rebrand and reposition coconut value chain as an occupation of choice for our women and our teeming youth, as it is very important for transforming the economy of Nigeria. Coconut is the oxygen that can resuscitate our economy and promote productivity.
Then it was time to walk the talk. By this action, the minister has just committed to an 80-year-old investment worth millions of naira if well nurtured. This is as coconut has a production lifespan of 80 years and produces 200 coconut fruits yearly, with a value chain that transcends health and wealth benefits. Same gesture was replicated by officials of the Nigerian coconut producers, the Ministry of Trade and Agriculture. And now to discussion. Crowdfunding as an alternative source of finance, which has been used over the years to fund various projects away from the usual sources of finance. Joining me is Emotimi Agama. He's head registration, exchanges, market infrastructure, and innovations of Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to have better understanding on crowdfunding and how it can be used to attain economic growth. You are welcome to Business Express, Emotimi Agama.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for not, breaking the name.
I should have just said Timi, but it won't be
No,
that nice.
perfect.
Well,
That's good.
let's go on to crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, we understand, has over time become an alternative source of finance. That might be strange to a whole lot of people out there. How does this actually work?
Well, thank you once again for having me. It's part of the mission and vision of the SEC to create an enabling business environment. And the DG of the SEC, Madam Lamido Yuguda, it's very, very passionate about small and medium scale enterprises because that's the nerve center of any economy. Particularly in Nigeria, most of the companies are actually medium and small enterprises. And so, what is the basis of their existence if it is not finance? And for that reason, the SEC thought it wise that we should provide a regulation around something that will help that finance. And what is that thing that will help that finance? It's called crowdfunding. And as the name suggests, crowdfunding, where you allow small amounts of money accumulate to the use of a medium or small scale enterprises. So that's what it is. Or how is it done? It is done via...
That's the question I was about to ask again.
Right? So let me wait.
So how is it done? No, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So how is it done? It is done via an online web portal or other infrastructures that allows people to, bring in money, accumulate money. Let's go back to the good old days where we used to have what we call Esusu, if you remember.
Yeah, okay.
What is Esusu? Esusu is about people putting money together, house to house.
In my own part of the country,
Yes.
it's called Asusu.
Okay, fine. So Asusu, Esusu, they all have a common denominator.
Yes, there's a su in it.
Yeah, there's a su in it. And so the idea is, how do we get people who are interested in putting their monies together little by little in order to build something?
Okay.
You understand? Little drops of water makes a what? A big
The
ocean.
oceans.
That is the idea. And that will help facilitate the growth of small and medium scale enterprise. But why is it crowdfunding? Why is there regulation? It's crowdfunding and there's regulation.
Okay, before we come to the regulation, take us through the kind of projects that this kind of funding can actually sponsor. You're talking about the MSMEs, which are at the central of development, more so that Nigeria is on that path of recovery. How does this actually work directly?
Great. Fantastic question, because that's something everybody needs to know. There is no restriction. That is the beauty of it. All that needs to happen is that you have a project, a well-planned project. So we're bringing about, planning, organization, right? And transparency in doing business. And it has to start from the ground. Hence, you're talking to small and medium scale enterprises. So there is no restriction as to the project that can be funded via crowdfunding.
Okay, how do contributors get return on investment?
Oh, it's part of the business plan. So for you to crowdfund, you must have a plan. For you to start any business, you must have a plan.
Sure.
Right? A business without a plan will surely fail, like a pack of cards. So that plan will naturally illustrate clearly what is the return on investment, when that returns will be paid, If it has to be paid within a month, within a year, you know, there is a structure. There's accounting. There's responsibility in it. So that's it. It's an organization. And you see, what had happened is that in the US, you have what the Jobs Act. The Jobs Act was promoting, you know, the funding of small and medium and small enterprises. And that is exactly what we are doing here. We want to promote the small and medium scale enterprises, letting them have access to funding. Because why? They are not able to assess the market with the formal process of capital raising. So that is the reason.
Okay, you're from SEC.
Yes.
Where is a place of regulation for crowdfunding? We have a lot of schemes where you get to contribute money. We have Ponzi schemes. We have multi-level marketing stuff. How do you get to differentiate all of this? And what's the regulation for crowdfunding?
Regulation, the SEC recently released the regulation for crowdfunding. And of course, we have a time period for which people that had earlier on been involved informally in this process must come to the SEC to register. So particularly by the ending of June, if you have not done so, you'll be violating the law. So, but regulation is important because the principal reason and objective of the SEC is the protection of investors. And without regulation, there will be no protection. Hence, there needs to be regulation in order for you to put people in check. Let them know exactly what they are doing, and let us also know the investors that are investing. And let the investors know those that are collecting their money so that they won't get missing.
Okay, in growing this special kind of financing, I understand the United States is ahead with like a 1 trillion. This kind of funding is expected to grow in the United States by 1 trillion by 2025. How can we take advantage of it to grow various sectors of our own economy back home?
That's why the DG of the SEC is very passionate about this, because funding is the nucleus of any business. And the small and medium scale enterprises are usually challenged in this area. Hence, we have provided that opportunity for me and you, the civil servants, the people working on the street, to be able to put some money together to be able to help a brother do a business, to be able to help a mother do a business, to be able to help a friend do a business. But it has to be done formally. And the reason for the formal nature of doing it is to provide some governance, some structure around what they are doing, in order that everybody that is doing anything will see the other person that is doing something. Transparency is the name of the word. And once you are able to put this structure around, once you are able to regulate it, you are also able to check the charlatans. Because a lot of people just collect money from people without people knowing what they are doing or where they are coming from. All of a sudden, before you know it, they are off. That we must stop. And if people are going to collect money from you and promising you returns on investment, the first question you must ask them, are you registered with the SEC? Because if you are not, then you are likely to be swindled. And that's what we want to protect.
From all you've shared, it goes further to tell us that crowdfunding is the way to go. We hear the citizens of Venezuela embarking on this kind of financing to ramp up money to enhance, to help government vaccinate all the citizens as COVID-19 rages on. Well, thank you so very much, Mr. Momotimi Agama, for sharing your thoughts with us at this particular point in time.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Well, moving on, let's see how commodities are faring. prices rose for a second day on Wednesday as signs of strong fuel demand in Europe, while the prospect of a near-term return of Iranian oil supply faded as the U.S. Secretary of State said sanctions against Tehran were unlikely to be lifted. Brent crude futures were up 28 cents at $72.48 a barrel and earlier rose to $72.58, the highest since May 2019. Brent rose 1% on Tuesday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures jumped 23 cents to $70.28 a barrel after rising to as high as $70.42, the most since October 17, 2018. Asia Pacific stocks mixed. China's producer inflation data for May comes in higher than expected. Bosseriable has global stocks update.
Hello and welcome to the Global Market Report. I am Bossede Able. The World Bank on Tuesday upgraded its growth forecast, with the global economy now expected to grow 5.6% in 2021. That compared against an earlier forecast in January for a 4% global economic expansion in 2021. Meanwhile, shares in Asia-Pacific markets were mixed on Wednesday as investors reacted to the release of Chinese inflation data. On the economic data front, official data released Thursday showed Chinese producer price index for May jumped 9% from a year earlier against expectations for an 8.5% increase. Mainland Chinese stocks pushed higher on the day as the Shanghai Composite climbed 0.32% to close 3,591.4, while the Hang Seng Index dipped 0.13% as at its final hour of trading, and the Nikkei also dropped 0.35%. European stocks were muted in early trading Wednesday as investors prepared for the next reading of U.S. inflation due Thursday. The quiet open for European markets reflects cautious sentiments ahead of the latest inflation data from the U.S., which could lead the Federal Reserve to taper asset purchases sooner rather than later. The Fed has previously continued that the higher price pressures are just temporarily as the economy continues to rebound from the pandemic-induced recession. Stocks futures in the United States were mostly flat on Wednesday as Wall Street appeared range-bound near its record levels. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average were lower by 30 points. The S&P 500 futures were essentially flat, while Nasdaq 100 futures gained 0.31%. While in Africa, markets were mostly negative. That's the Global Market Report. I am Bossede Able. Back to Benny.
Thank you, Bossede. And from there, international currencies is next. Where we end this edition of Business Express. Remember to keep in touch, so do send in your comments, observations and suggestions. Also be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on NTA's channel. Business Express returns Thursday at 9:30 a.m. I am Benny Adams saying keep thinking and doing business.